Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, The Future of Textbooks, Bringing Books to Life with AR from an Authoring Perspective, presented by Eirik Wahlstrøm, Rob Heathcote, and Sarah Dudley. Eirik is the co-founder and CEO of Ludenso. Ludenso is building the world's leading augmented reality authoring platform, built specifically for publishers, and works closely with publishers like Cambridge University Press, Sage, and Infinitus Learning to make learning more engaging and inclusive through the use of AR. Sarah is a qualified biology teacher with experience of both teaching the sciences in schools and training adults in teaching techniques. She has worked for Cambridge University Press and Assessment since 2020 as a biology author, developing the grades 9 to 12 biology teaching materials for the Ministry of Education in Oman. Recently, she worked with Cambridge University Press and Assessment and Ludenso on a pilot project to incorporate augmented reality elements into educational textbooks. Rob is a former teacher of computer science who then started PG Online Publishers in 2013. He has written several books for various school subjects and has worked as an editor for many years. PG Online published digital teaching resources, textbooks, and more recently, a series of clear revised revision guides which have incorporated augmented reality technology. Hello, Eirik, Rob, and Sarah. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim, and thanks for the nice introduction. And happy to see that so many attendees have chosen to come to this talk. In my brief 8 to 10 minutes presentation, I'm just going to give all of you a brief introduction to what augmented reality really is, why it's relevant for the educational space, and also why it hasn't really taken off yet. Lastly, I will talk a little bit about how AR can be used at scale to promote better learning outcomes and exemplify that of how this platform is working in practice. So, thank you for a very nice introduction, Kim. I started this company alongside Ingrid and Harald a few years back, and we have around 20 years now of experience within the XR industry. With us, we've got some amazing investors, such as the co-founders of Kahoot, and we're on this journey to create learning more engaging and fun. Because one of the problems we saw, and that some studies show, is that as many as 85% of all students are not motivated by the learning materials. And you can just imagine how this would be different if school was looking more like this. That would be pretty awesome. Unfortunately, we're a decade or two away from this reality, but we are at the point in time where AR can provide beneficial learning outcomes, where students can go and explore the moon's surface, and where we can, in fact, just tie up the physical learning resources with the digital ones, as exemplified here. And just to do a quick denotation of the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. So in virtual reality, you're completely engulfed by a digital environment, while with augmented reality, you're blending the digital and the physical together. And for the latter of this webinar, we will only focus on the augmented reality side of things. And why do you, as an author or an educator, need to think about augmented reality? That's a bit the same question as asking why you would need to consider the iPhone or the iPad a couple of decades back. Augmented reality is set to take over as the next generation of smartphones, and already today, augmented reality is powering over 3 billion devices where you can experience amazing learning experiences, as which will be exemplified by Rob in his part of the presentation. In addition, coming back to getting students more motivated and engaged, when we've been in classroom and tested our technology, 96% of all students are motivated by the learning materials, which is a massive increase from the 15% mentioned earlier. And AR helps because it gives the students and the learners an opportunity to learn in their preferred learning style. Some learn better by reading, and they can continue to read. Some learn better by watching videos or hearing podcasts, or by interacting with experiences. And everyone learns better from getting the same kind of learning content, but from different sources. There's also a lot of research going on now in the field of 3D and AR that shows particularly strong benefits for those kids with cognitive difficulties or learning disabilities. which are really getting a new way of taking in knowledge through the power of AR. And then the question arises, why aren't we seeing more of this in the classrooms across the world today if all of those benefits are already here? Well, there's three main barriers to the widespread adoption of AR, and that's basically the price of creating experiences. It is the scale at which you can make experiences, and it's the usability of the apps. This is how it would look like if you as an author would be trying to make your own augmented reality experiences. You would have to learn how to navigate in a complex program, which will take hours and weeks to just know how to navigate in. And then if you were to publish something that your students would be able to see, then it would take 2 weeks before you made a change until the students could see that change in practice. That's why we set out to make a new platform which would work as a drag and drop tool, where authors such as Sarah can just go in and drag and drop the enrichments she wants and elevate the learning experiences with digital elements, such as 3D models, links, video, and audio. And now the time it takes to enrich a page with a digital element goes down from 2 weeks to just 2 minutes. And if you're curious about how this is actually working and want the proof point, then just look at this very short 2-minute video of how this platform works. So this is the platform. It's just a web browser where you can search for different models that would be relevant to showcase in your physical book. And then by just drag and dropping and navigating, you can see how this would be looking in AR, which you will be able to test out live later in this webinar. Another option for adding digital elements is adding links, where you can just drag and drop a link icon, and then you copy paste whatever link you want to see, and then that will be instantaneously available for the students after. My apologies for all of this clicking sounds while the enrichment is being made. Another cool thing is the ability to customize the 3D models by adding labels explaining the different functionalities of hair, the heart's anatomy, for example. And if you would like to have more than one 3D model, it's easy to just drag and drop yet another 3D model to showcase how, for example, the heart is looking like when it's not open or dissected. And the last element to show is also how you can embed videos directly into the learning materials by just drag and dropping the video component, where you can resize it and place it wherever you want. And the only thing you would have to do is to copy and paste the video link, and then it will show in the video after. So that's it. You're going to get to try it out very soon. But if you want to experience the magic yourself and try to create some of these AR-enhanced learning materials, we will give a free trial to the first 5 authors who contact me afterwards. So if that sounds interesting, please contact us at hello@ludenso.com, and you will be able to do this magic yourself. And now, Sarah, I'm very excited to hear what you have to say about us, if we're just saying nonsense or if this is actually, or if some of this is actually true. So please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Eirik. That was great. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm coming to this as an author. I'm borderline millennial, so I don't have much tech experience, so I think that's quite useful for the publishing world to know what it's like to come into AR authoring and how I use Ludenso to help me. So just a little bit about me. I'm a qualified science teacher. I was acting head of department for some time before I settled down to have my family. I started working with Cambridge University Press a few years back to do some biology authoring for the project in Oman. and it's all about developing biology curriculums and using existing texts and changing them to fit with a new syllabus. And as I said, I'm a mother of 2 children. I'm also involved in the Scout organisation as well. So I've got a lot to keep me busy. So I was approached by Ludenso last year to adapt a chapter in a book to use with AR, just to see how it works. And one of the first things I wanted to look at was, what is the appropriate material to use with AR? We chose transporting animals. As you can see from Eirik's demonstration, there's a lot of opportunities here to actually use AR when we're teaching about biology. These particular topics, when you use a textbook, it can be quite flat, whereas when you're actually teaching in the classroom, you tend to look at models and actually trying to visualize how these different elements within the human body fit together. I can imagine for lots of other topics, teachers will be able to tell how they can use that AR element to visualize things that if you just had the textbook in front of you, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see exactly how these things fit together. I was really conscious when I was doing this project to try and make sure that I was using the AR elements actively rather than passively. So I wanted to really avoid having bits in the text that just said, now open the AR model, now look at the video. I wanted to make sure that there was some form of engagement. And this is very similar to how we do authoring anyway. We usually try and do things like have a picture. We then would have questions about the picture to try and make sure that people are engaging with the activity and with the resource, rather than just passively looking at it. And that will obviously make it much more of a learning experience for the people using it. I also tried to think about the purpose of the AR, so we weren't just dropping in elements because it's really fun and fantastic. I completely get what Eirik says about the fact that children aren't engaged with the learning materials, and then when he put in these elements, they were suddenly really engaged. But we need to make sure that what we're putting in has an actual use, that it does actually address the syllabus and has a learning opportunity there. As we mentioned, we'd like to have a variety of elements. If it was all just 3D models, it might get a bit dull very quickly. So having different links, so you have different reading materials, videos, and the AR elements, while the 3D models, makes it a bit more engaging as well. We also had to think, when we were adapting the textbook, how to signpost that there is an AR element, and I will show you an image of how we showed readers that there was AR elements on this page in a moment. So here's an example of one of the textbook images. This is the original textbook, and it's just got a very flat image of the circulatory system. It's a double circulatory system, and it's absolutely fine. It's really useful on its own in order to show students where the blood is flowing and where it's going to around the body. But what I thought would be quite good on this image is to incorporate the 3D element to show students how that heart and the circulatory system looks in real life. So I've just put that piece of text up there. It says, if you look down at it, it says, have a close look at the 3D model of the circulatory system. That would just be a passive use of it, but I've followed it up with, what do you notice about the flow of blood around a 3D model compared with the diagram in figure 9.2? So hopefully this will come up here. There's the 3D model. And the idea is that we're trying to get the students engaged with that, not just going, oh, wow, there's a model, isn't that cool? But actually trying to look at it and thinking, how does it compare with the system, the model that we're using in the figure, to really try and get them to look at it critically, and hopefully that will then be a learning experience for them. These are just some other examples of things that I did to the text to incorporate the AR. The one that you actually saw Eirik show was a video about living fish and showing how blood flows through them. So again, I've used a question to try and get students to think more critically about the video that we're showing them. This one was showing you the a link. This one would go to a link to the British Heart Foundation about ECGs. And what I thought was useful here was the signposting element that we've got there, just an image on the side of a phone being held in a hand. There's various images that you can use to represent AR. We chose this one because we thought it was very useful for students. It's quite easy to see that that's a mobile phone, and they just have to get out their phone and hold it over the page, and then they will see the link come up. So on all the AR elements, we have that in the border in the textbook next to where the element is. Again, this is just a bit of text to show you what I was doing to try and involve the children or the students. So it's looking at the 3D model of the heart, but we're saying to sketch the external outline of the heart, label the left and right atria, the left, right ventricles, and so on. So it's not just looking at a picture and copying a picture, but by looking at a 3D model which you can manipulate, it's actually much more closer to what you would do in a science lab anyway. So if you didn't have a heart to hand, then this is a really good alternative to get students to look at 3D images and convert them into 2D images for themselves. This one was, again, comparing the heart with the images, but this time it was watching the sheep's heart dissection, which fortunately we had access to. Again, it's talking about looking at the real heart in the sheep's video and comparing it to the diagrams. So it's a really valuable way of comparing what the ideal heart would look like to an actual real heart and how that appears. These ones was just pausing the video to again do a diagram. And this last one was quite an interesting use of AR, where instead of being a visual thing, we actually embedded a sound file to show the lub-dub of a heartbeat, and it actually just played the sound file so that students could hear that rather than it just being a written description of the heartbeat. So I know Eirik's already shown this, but I just wanted to go through how I was doing the authoring with this. I would have my textbook up with the PDF, and I would also have Ludenso Studios up, and I would be going through them page by page, thinking about which elements I can drop into my textbook, and I would be putting them in the Ludenso Studio, and then I'd also be marking up my PDF with the changes in text that I would like, so that it would actually be referencing the AR element. So this was using an existing text and editing it to adapt it. Obviously, text could be written from the start with AR in mind, but I think the value of this program is that you can have an existing text and change it very, very quickly and update it very quickly to use these elements, which was really quite an eye-opener. I could also generate a QR code, which I've covered over there, so it doesn't open up anything for you. But when I generated the QR code using the Ludenso Studios, I could check what that 3D model looked like on my phone in real time. So you can test, and that's what it says up there, test on the top right of the Heart Ludenso Studios image. That would generate my QR code, and I could then look straight away to see whether it looked good or whether I needed to change the angle of the AR element or anything along those lines. So there's quite a few things here. I'm definitely, as I said, a borderline millennial. I don't really have much knowledge of technology. So I was coming from an authoring perspective of basically just being able to edit PDFs and do a lot with words, but not much else. So I did come to it completely new, and I found it very useful. So I think this is going to be an interesting development in educational textbooks. First of all, I think it's important that we make sure that whenever you do use the AR elements, it is signposted, because what you don't want to do is have children or students opening their textbooks and getting their phones out and trying to scan every single page, trying to look through the textbooks, try and find those different elements, because that's what they're excited by. If you've got it signposted, then they know exactly when they need to get out their phones, whether that's at home or at school, and so they should be a bit more engaged in the lesson in that way, rather than it just being an exciting different thing for them. I think the important thing about this use of AR is the potential for accessibility. I mean, usually when we talk about accessibility, we usually think about people with physical disabilities, but I think this has a real value for people that have learning difficulties as well. So if you have a condition such as ADHD or anything along those lines, actually changing the way that you're interacting with the text can really help with your learning ability. Particularly with people that have dyslexia, for instance, they visualize things in 3D that much more than people without dyslexia. And so actually being able to engage with those models and manipulate them and turn them around, which you are able to do, is a really valuable tool for them to be able to understand what's actually what you're actually trying to teach them. So I think this is a really positive step for people with learning difficulties. And as with anything, if you're improving it for people with learning difficulties, then people without difficulties will still benefit from it, because anything that benefits somebody that struggles will benefit everyone anyway. So that hopefully should be a really positive use of AR in the future. And this is something that Eirik spoke about, engagement of the students, both in and out of the classroom. In the classroom, it's fairly easy as a teacher to engage the students if you're a good teacher. Because you're there, you can interact with them and you can actually talk to them as you're there. But when they're out of the classroom, if they're trying to do revision, if they're just trying to go over some homework, it's very, very easy to just sort of phase out. You can read a whole page of text and find that you've not taken anything in from that text. And I think this will break up that text. I mean, much in the way that we would use in the past, putting in figures, putting in diagrams to try and break up that text so that students can take in the information that much more easily. I think this is another tool for us to use as authors to help break it up and make sure that students stay engaged in the text. We know that when you switch methods of presentation, that helps with learning, because you have the recency effect and you have the primacy effect. So you have the things that you last saw, the things that you first saw, that's the sort of thing that you remember. And by doing this switching throughout the text, it actually changes that brain function, and it means that you can remember things more easily because of the changing that's occurring. I've put availability of resources. I'm working with some companies in Oman, with the Ministry of Education in Oman, and some of their schools may not have the same resources as other schools. So this is, again, a really good way of making sure that schools have access. So for instance, with the heart dissection, if they don't have access to any hearts to dissect, then this, they could show a video, but actually having the 3D model for the students to manipulate as well. It is not quite the same as having a real heart, but it's there, it's getting there. It's much closer than just looking at a diagram. And that could really help. I'm really excited about the potential in particular of showing experiments, classroom experiments, in a nice, easy way for students to look at that when they're at home. It's all about enriching the learning environment. So we've mentioned this before. It's making sure that you can engage with the topic and actually use those models to make sure that you can understand them, understand how that works in 3D. But also we can do things such as taking the students out of the classroom and going to see things like having a look at a museum and having a tour of a museum, or having a look inside of a specific ecosystem. All of that can be done by using the AR elements within the textbook. I think there's definitely a potential for a greater range of resources. When I started working with Ludenso, it was just a small library of resources that we could use. So that's increasing all the time. I made a huge list of things that I would like to see, certainly from the biology side of it, and Ludenso have responded, and they've been increasing their library, and they're working on that all the time. So I'm really excited about the fact that we've got more coming up. And the final thing, from the authoring perspective, I found it very easy to use. As you can tell from my PowerPoint presentation, I'm not that technologically minded, but it was really a case of just drag and drop. And so I really enjoyed using it. It was really fun to use, actually, and I look forward to using it more in the future. Final comment really is I want to think about this from an authoring perspective. If you are including AR, you really do need to work out whether you are using that AR element for entertainment to just get the children engaged or students engaged, or is there an educational value to it? And I think there is an educational value to it, but as an author, you do need to make sure that whatever you're choosing is having an effect on their education. It is relating to the syllabus, it is relating to the curriculum that you're trying to teach, and that it has to be fun as well, but it does have to have that thought of, is this actually useful? Will this help the student learn? So it's just something to bear in mind, because when I started this, I was so excited because there's so many fun things that you can put in. But at the end of the day, you do need to make sure that what you're putting in is actually going to be useful for the student. That's pretty much it from me. I think I've done my 15 minutes. So I'm going to hand over now to Rob. I look forward to answering your questions if you have any at the end of the session. So Rob, over to you.
Thank you. Hello. Hopefully you can see the start of the presentation here. A little bit about my company and my background. Then I want to look at two different ways of marketing the VR, whether it's to customers generally or whether it's to schools. And then a bit more about how we've used AR and how that's been embedded. I was a former teacher of nearly 15 years and then got out for good behaviour. I've been writing books since 1998, and in fact that was why I went into teaching. My kids are now going through high school, so I've become very much more aware of what they do, and regular homework with them every night, and I think that really sort of helps. Having been out of teaching for 10 years, it really keeps me in touch with how kids learn and what makes them click, and I think that's been quite helpful in the development of all of this. 10 years ago, I started PG Online. I noticed that teachers don't really have very many resources that they can use. They traditionally like to go out and make their own resources for their own lessons, and I saw a huge inefficiency in this. Really, it was a little bit like asking every plumber to go and forge their own wrench. But why can't there just be a wrench shop for teachers? So we started making an awful lot of teaching resources for them, and they started using those because teachers have a heavy working load, and if we provide the very best resources for all the schools, then it allows them to deliver better lessons, to get greater engagement, and they act really as the delivery mechanism of a good resource, rather than having to just get the ball over the net with something that they've been able to put together given the limited time available, especially when they're teaching 20-30 hours a week, 20-30 lessons a week. It's almost impossible to spend the amount of time that teachers really should be putting into their own teaching resources. In our 10-year history, we introduced all of the digital resources in 2013 when we first started. 2 years later, we started to introduce textbooks, and those books complemented all the digital teaching resources. And that all started in computer science, which was my original teaching subject. In 2017, we started introducing more subjects around the sort of STEM area. And after only a year, we had roughly 50 to 60% of schools using our materials, and we were then able to conduct a very wide sort of statistical data with over 60,000 student results, and we found that schools using our materials increased their results by 12% at sort of GCSE level, or in states it's kind of year 8, 9, 9, 10, and then by 23% in year 12, or in our case at A level. And then 3 years ago we started a new series of books called Clear Revise, which are very highly illustrated revision guides for, I think there's about 15 different secondary high school subjects now that we cater for, and they are beautifully illustrated, highly distilled and condensed revision guides. And now we have popped in augmented reality. So we've taken 4 science books and a geography book, and we've added AR elements to each of those. And the reason we've done this is because it provides an extra dimension to those books. As Sarah said, it provides another way of getting the ball over the net. It provides another way of explaining something, and a lot of people believe that they are either a kinesthetic learner or a visual learner or an auditory learner. There's lots of research to say that is a thing, and there's plenty to say that isn't. But however people believe they learn best, and it may vary from topic to topic, the more ways you have of delivering a particular topic, the better. And if you can absorb a description in more than one way at the same time, in a standard textbook, it's a bit of text and a photo. If you can now do it with a text, a photo, a video, and possibly a 3D model, then I would say that's double the chance of that information going in. We also wanted to sort of complete the triangle, really. We've helped teachers and schools for years and years. The way we're using AR is, I don't really see it being used in class very often. I know teachers are, but it's largely for students and possibly their parents when they're helping them to use at home, away from a school environment. But teachers in school may well want to use it on an ad hoc basis with some kind of casting facility with their own whiteboards, or they may want to make themselves aware that the content that exists there and then set that for homework to go take, kids, in your books, page 65 tonight, read the text, look at the pictures, answer the questions, look at the AR elements, and build something in there. But without doubt, it has increased engagement in students. We get parents emailing us regularly to say that they wish they had books like this when they're at school. Was one we got recently. And that's got to be a good thing. It provides a wonderful competitive advantage if you're able to put it into your book. As the first publisher outside Norway to do so, it certainly provided us with a first mover advantage, which is excellent. And if you can persuade your publishing companies to do the same, then I think it will benefit them hugely. It helps us engage with the B2C market. Traditionally, publishers tend to sell to schools directly, or if they, but never selling to parents and students directly. I think this provides a lot more engagement and opens up that channel of communication, which again is, if we're trying to achieve this sort of shared goal of boosting knowledge and improving grades, it all helps. It helps the teachers, it helps the schools, it helps the parents, and it helps the students, however we do that. Improves understanding, and it will improve results. And we are setting out to prove just that it'll do just that, like we did in 2018 with our teaching resources. and I'm fairly confident that will happen too. So developing content, Sarah's touched on this too. It works very well retrospectively if you've already published a book, because you can just go back and drag and drop content in there. If you are able to consider whilst writing it what you can bring in, I think even better. But it requires having some experience of the whole process before you start writing, and really understanding how all that works and how it will integrate. Otherwise, it becomes a 2 or 3 step process. I think Sarah's sort of indicated that this is the process that CUP went through, in that they had a book, Sarah suggested things to put in there, and then suggested how the book needs to change. That would have had to go back and be re-edited, retypeset, and then you get another round of issues that result as text expands and overflow text falls off the edge of a page. Without wanting to slow down production, it works very well retrospectively. We've opted not to go for signposting purely because at the moment it gives us the flexibility to do whatever we want. We can add extra content in on an almost weekly basis, and that gives us great marketing possibilities, because we just advertised this morning a new image, and we advertised that it gave a live update to their printed book, which after a slight scratching of heads, you figure out that is actually possible now, which is brilliant. But we have signposted on the front cover with a great big sticker, and the app is getting better and better at doing its own level of signposting with a whole new contents page and a new interface recently. If the author considers all the content, that is probably the best thing, or possibly an editor. Outside that, it needs to be someone who really understands the subject content. Otherwise, they are going to end up, as Sarah suggested, with stuff that is purely for entertainment value. There might be a bit of wow factor, but it'll wear off pretty thin. It needs to be something that really impacts the learning. So authors and publishers need to keep in mind where AR will fit. It's not easy to find authors who have that level of technical knowledge. They also need to believe in this technology. It's got a huge wow factor, but after the wow has inevitably worn off, they've got to believe that there's something left that will improve it. Otherwise, it's difficult to engage them. And they've got to have that sort of level of imagination where when they're writing, or even when they're going back and adding material retrospectively, that they can see that this is how this could be improved, or they can come up with new and imaginative questions and ways of writing that you just couldn't do with a standard 2-dimensional book. It's a great process. I think at whatever stage you're involved in it, as an author, as an editor, or as a publisher, I thoroughly enjoyed the whole process. The book has got to stand up on its own without AR. You cannot produce a book just to use AR. It's got to be a great book, and if the AR system was never there, that book has still got to be a great book. It's just a way of making great books better. So I wouldn't rely on it, but it is a wonderful accompaniment. And I put there, and some authors may have no part in the AR content process, and that's usually by their choice, and by their level of interest and fear, really. A lot of them are good authors, tend to be a little older, with a little more years of teaching experience. Maybe they've been an examiner, and they tend to be the ones who have less sort of technical confidence. But it also depends on the subject. Bit of feedback we've received from parents. This is one we received a couple of weeks ago. So it certainly increases their engagement and motivation. Students here are all starting to study or studying this summer for their exams. We heard that it reduced stress in their household, partly because I think it gave kids an excuse that there was a screen to be had and a value in having a mobile phone with them whilst they are revising. How much they used it for this and how much they used it for anything else, we don't know. But we definitely had reports from a couple of parents who said that it made revision a little bit more fun and a bit more engaging, and it just reduced some of that that barrier. It encourages students to read more. If there's a 3D model or a video there and they get it, they might just read another paragraph because it's starting to click. Provides one more way to understand the topic, as I was saying earlier, and they value the videos and the models. It's helped them for sure. Lastly, before we come to questions, there is a slide here with a QR code on it, and a sample page from one of our books. You are very welcome to scan that QR code. It will direct you to a pink web page where you can select either the iOS app or an Android app. It'll take you straight to the Ludenso app in the App Store where you can download that, which should take no more than a minute or so. Once you've done that, select the Biology Clear Revised book and shine your phone at the page on the heart and circulation on the right there. And then you can have a bit of a play around with the features within the app. You can see the 3D model that pops up and test out the label features as well. Otherwise, I shall pass back to you, Kim. Thank you for your part and questions.
Thank you all for sharing your experience with augmented reality and textbooks. And we do have a couple of questions in already. If you have a question, please type it into the question box on the control panel on your screen, and I'll be reading those questions to the panelists. So the first question is, do you use AR with theoretical models, for example, critical thinking?
Yeah, I mean, I've only done the biology textbook, so there's not much in the way of critical models there. But yeah, I can see how it could be used quite easily. Rob, you probably have more experience of how that's used.
It's much easier to use the models with science subjects and to illustrate physical things. When it gets a little bit more abstract and contextual, it's much harder to find something that will illustrate that effectively. But there are ways of doing it, and there are ways of rewriting content within books that will use other elements to explain things. But it's a different approach that requires a lot more thought, a lot more time, and for publishers, trying to get a book out quickly is an important factor in whether you can publish it at all. Being first to market gives you a huge advantage. Being last to market is not much of a help. And usually publishers are given such little time to produce a book once they know what's going to be in the new specification, that getting a book out at all before the course actually starts is quite difficult. So we are trying to squeeze in a whole another process into publishing, and it's a learning experience for all of us. We will over time find ways to embed more things, but for now I think the easiest thing is the quick wins whilst the technology is sort of in its early stages and we're learning what to do.
Okay. Thank you. So the next question is, have best practices for the integration of AR been established, and where might they be found? This person investigated creating an AR embedded content for their teaching materials a few years ago, but was stymied by operating systems.
I'm not aware of any sort of official best practices, but I would say that the best practice for certainly publishing material is to make sure that, as we've both said, is to make sure that the materials enhance learning and they're not there just for window dressing.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually, because Rob was saying about in their books not signposting, whereas it was something we were quite keen to do within the Cambridge textbooks, is to signpost. So that's something where there isn't a best practice per se. It's just what fits for your book and what you envisage you're using the book for. So I think it can be quite. It depends on what the purpose is of the book that you're producing. Is it just a textbook, like the revision books? I can see how not signposting every single bit would actually be quite useful. But in a textbook where you might be interacting with the teacher using it, it might be better to have it signposted for behaviour control reasons in the classroom, making sure kids aren't just using their phones all the time without any permission. So in that sense, the best practice is determined by what the use of the book is. And that's something that we've both been saying is at the heart of it, you've really got to make sure that you're using whatever you're putting in, it's got to enhance the learning. It can't just be something you're putting in as a gimmick. It's got to have a value. So it's always thinking about the purpose of your book. So although there's no sort of industry-wide best practice, it's because it's only just starting out really. And I think the main thing is think about the purpose of your book.
Just to chime in on one thing that we found quite important early on was that we were talking with quite a few publishers who had tried to do this by outsourcing the whole process to someone else. And that ended up with the developers at those agencies creating some experiences that they thought were great, and that often ended up being gimmickry. So I think at least one of the best practices is having authors who have the domain knowledge and know what can provide value, like Sarah and Rob has both been talking about. I think that's the single most important best practice to take onwards from using AR with textbooks, is to tie up actually relevant models with the curriculum. And also, if you can, go more into depth and embed it into the text such that it provides more learning. It's in a context where the student will be asked to think for themselves and relate what they're reading with what they're experimenting and interacting with. So, but yeah, engaging the author or editor, the domain expert, I think is the single most important best practice of this.
Okay. Eirik, would you be able to address the second part of the question, which was maybe issues with operating systems? Do you think that that's still an issue today, and how would someone overcome it?
It is still an issue for many applications, but it's a lot less of an issue than what it was. In 2017, there were around 500 million devices that were AR capable, and today there's over 3 billion. So just in a few years, there's really been a dramatically 6-time increase of what kind of phones and devices are now capable of running these AR experiences, which definitely tends to show that this is now more widely available and accessible for so many people. In addition, what we have done, as well as some other companies, is that we're also allowing everyone who does not have the capability to see the AR models in 3D. So this will be a very weird showing of my phone here, but you can also get up the 3D models in a 3D viewer, and this is accessible to every phone. So not just the 3 billion phones that have AR capabilities, but now all of the content that is enriched and is 3D is available for everyone. And I think that's a crucial step towards making a tool and a platform that will work regardless of if you have the newest phone or if you have an older one. But just as a frame of reference for the AR functionality, an iPhone 6s or a Samsung S7 or better is now what is working. But with a 3D viewer, basically every phone is working.
Okay, thank you. So the next question is, do you see different acceptance levels depending on the age of the learners? This person teaches medical students. So I know that Sarah and Rob, you're more in the what we would call the K through 12 level here in the United States. So what do you see any different acceptance levels between maybe K through 12 learners to college level and graduate student learners, medical students?
I don't personally. I think we supplied materials to pretty much the K6 to 12 bracket, or the 6 to 12, year 6 to 12, and the level of enthusiasm is pretty much the same throughout. And speaking to their parents, they're as engaged as ever. I think perhaps the older you get, you become engaged for different reasons. You see through the wow factor more quickly, and you actually begin to use it for what it is. But I think it won't take long for that to happen with the younger generation as well.
Yeah, certainly my own children who are 8 and 11, they absolutely love playing with the AR elements, and that was showing them a GCSE level book, and they learned quite a lot about the circulatory system because they were just so engaged with the 3D models. I do think when you're older, like Rob said, it's much more about the actual learning and what is the value of that element, whereas when they're younger, they're just excited to see it. But it just goes to show that learning will be happening anyway. I think I have the children who know the most about biology in their school now.
And just adding one thing, we've been working with, amongst others, Sage at the university level, and what we see that they are also doing to a great extent is linking videos and links. And a value for the university students is also that when they're preferring to have the physical textbooks, you have a portal to watch all the digital resources that the editor and author has deemed valuable for them to learn about or know about. Imagine that you're a college student that is reading in your textbook, and you see that, oh, there's a video link to this page. And then you have to take up your phone or your laptop, you have to go to the publisher's website, you have to log in, you have to find the right curriculum, you have to go to the right chapter, and then you can find resources. There's a lot of clicks in that process, while what they're used to is just using Snapchat or TikTok and just taking up your phone and then it's there. And that's more of the experience that can be provided with this kind of application, where maybe the 3D models will be less valuable when you come to the university level, but the digital link between the physical learning resources and the digital one is strong and simple and easy to use for the students.
I think it's really important as an author to have those videos curated. We're picking out the best videos to show them. So I mean, it's things like I've done DNA extraction recently on a book, and there's a lot of DNA experiments out there that advise extracting DNA from strawberries and bananas. But I know as an author and as a scientist that you're getting pectin out of them, not DNA. It's just a sort of illusion of DNA, so it's best to use onions and those sort of things that actually, if they're coming from the textbook, they know that video or that link has a value, it has been vetted. They're not just going onto YouTube and just finding the first video that they on the topic. They might have mistakes in, so that's a really valuable resource, I think.
Okay. All right. Well, the next question is about whether this has applications for enriching digital books as well as physical books. Is it being used there, or are you focusing primarily on physical books?
It works on everything. It works on a photocopy. And if you've downloaded the example there, it works on your screen. So if you've got a digital book, it works on that too. The only slight oddity is that you're shining one screen at another screen, but it still works.
Yeah, what Rob said, but personally I would say that the greatest value is when you have the physical book and you can lose yourself and have focus and in-depth. Some really focused time on the book, and you maybe read for 6 pages before you even consider taking up your screen. But if you then see that, oh, this is a topic I'm more interested to learn about, and you see that there's a video here, then you can take your phone out and you're immediately engaged in the same topic. You're not losing your focus. You're not losing your focus for the chapter or the segment you're reading about. You're just getting more of that in a new format that makes you learn more. I would say it works for both, but I would say that using it with a physical book is the best experience.
All right, this question is about whether the level of engagement might drop after the novelty of AR fades. It's a new technology right now, and of course, younger students are seeing it as new technology and are excited about it. Is that something that you have thought about and have any concerns about, that the novelty might fade?
It goes back to what I was saying about making sure that whatever you're putting it in not as a gimmick, you're putting it in with a purpose. And as I was saying earlier, we went from textbooks being just textbooks to incorporating images and incorporating photographs, and then breaking up the text with things like keyword boxes and questions. So I feel like this is just another step on the evolution of how we engage with the learning material. So although the novelty of getting out your phone might wear off, I don't think the value of the AR element will do if it's been chosen carefully and it's for the correct purpose. So that is something to consider when you're authoring, is that you're not just putting it in a whiz bang kind of way. You want to get everyone getting their phones out and engaging at every step. It's really thinking about the purpose of what you're putting in and making sure that then has value, because then it will add to the textbook. You can't really imagine textbooks nowadays with just writing in. You will always see images and different boxes and colours. And I think that in the future, we're going to be in this world where you just won't imagine reading your textbook without your phone next to you to just check on that video or to have a look at that AR model.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. And this is about maybe why the need for the physical book at all. And I think that's a big question, a question that will be debated at TAA for many years. I always thought that the physical book was going to die, I think, for the last 30 years. So it hasn't died yet. So why focus this on physical books? Kind of primarily, you are saying that it also has use for digital books, but you're talking about how you can bring physical books to life through AR. So maybe just speak to that a little bit about why focusing on the physical book is something that you felt was important.
For me, I just feel like having something physical there is very important for engaging your brain and your body. We always talk about movement of the body when you're learning actually helps you to incorporate the learning. Having a physical book in front of you has the opportunity to look at different presentations of the same subject, and that means that some people will be able to read something and then others will look at the diagram, others will look at the video, and they will draw understanding in different ways from the different presentations. And I don't believe in learning styles. I know Rob made a reference to that. But I do believe that looking at things in different ways can help you to understand it much more than if you just had one style of presentation. The textbooks allows people the authors in particular, to explain something in detail. And sometimes just reading the text isn't enough for a student to understand it. But on the flip side of that, just looking at a video, the student might watch that video and not take away the key points that they require from that video, unless they look at the text as well and go, oh, that's what the video was talking about. So it's that switching between visual imagery, sounds, and the text that will help a student to be able to actually understand the topic, as opposed to just presenting it in one format, which means they may take it in, but they may not have that understanding of it.
Yeah, and just there has been several studies proving that you are actually learning more from the physical book than you are from a digital book. One of the factors counting in there is the spatial memory for when you're reading a book, you're actually ascribing the knowledge to a specific place in that book, which is quite powerful. Personally, I don't think the books are going away in the next 10 years either. We will see maybe a decline of 5 to 10% or something along those lines. It only decreased 10% in the last decade, actually getting an upswing during the pandemic, at least in the US. I think, but I do think we will see that AR and other ways of elevating and enhancing the physical book will get a renaissance. I think I'm of course a bit biased, but I think, Sarah, that this will be the natural next step of evolution of how you can create textbooks. I think even when we've talked to a lot of publishers who's also done surveys out to their student groups, the younger generation who's been who grew up with the iPhone since they were 7, and still it's 1/3 who would strongly prefer their textbooks, and another third that would prefer to have the textbook and digital resources, and there's less than 1/3 who just wants digital elements or doesn't care about the textbooks. It's not going away anytime soon, in my opinion, or from what I've heard from all the publishers we're talking to. So I think it will stay here for a long time onwards. Any concluding remarks, Rob?
Hopefully so. We're not getting rid of textbooks. There are major publishers who have vowed to go entirely digital, but we are not going to be following that suit.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Eirik, Rob, and Sarah, for sharing your experience with this fascinating technology. And thank you all for participating in today's presentation and sharing your questions.